Hey, we are at 5 lines in the bottom of Nun Dalet of a pet, and Hatitzan is Mishnah. So again, just to recap what we did yesterday, there are sort of lists all the arayot, all those prohibited relationships together. There are different subcategories within them, like many ways to view them. Some are based on the prohibition, some are chayiv mita, some are chayiv karet. Some are based on relationships, some are genetic relationships, right, like sister or child, and some are marriage relationships. And of course, the Torah uses different words by different ones. So yesterday we got into this discussion about whether a relationship that's a half sibling or half relationship is also prohibited, right? So a father's brother's wife, a doda, an aunt, is prohibited. We said yesterday it's only prohibited if they share a common father. But if this father's brother is only through the mother, then that prohibition does not exist. We said, however, by other ones, like for example, Eshetach, right, the wife of a brother, it doesn't matter. If it's a person's brother through a mother or through a father, his wife becomes prohibited. So today, the question is, what about Achot Ishto? What about a wife's sister? So that's another prohibition, right? You're not allowed to marry a woman and her sister during her lifetime. What about if she's a sister through her mother, through her father, right? It's only a half sister, as we would call it. So says the Mishnah, it's not. So now 5 lines from the bottom. Amru lo meita ishtecha. A person is married to a woman and they come to him and say there was a shipwreck and your wife died, right? The person's wife died. So he's now permitted to marry her sister, right? So he marries Nasa Achota, but only Me'avia. He marries her sister who shares a common father with her. And then that sister goes on the ship as well, and they come back and tell her that she died. Okay, this sounds like a very unreliable boat line, but nonetheless, they keep going, right? So wife number 2 goes on a ship, whatever, it doesn't have to be a ship, but she dies, Meta. So she dies also. And then he nasa chota mi'ima. He marries her sister from her mother. So this wife number 3 is not related to wife number 1 in any way, right? Because wife number 1 and 2 share a father, wife number 2 and 3 share a mother, but wife 1 and 3 don't share a father or a mother. So he marries her, and then she also dies in a shipwreck, Meta. And then Nasa chota mi'avia. He marries a 4th wife who's a sister from a father to number 3, and she also dies. Then Nasa achota me'ima. So he marries a 5th woman who is a sister from a mother. So again, number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 all share 50% of their genes, 50% of their parentage, not genes. And they all are presumed to have died except for number 5. And then, of course, this is where the story gets exciting, all 5 women show up at once. So the ship comes back and turns out they were all on some vacation island. None of them died. They were all rescued. And so there are 5 women standing here who have gone through marriage to this one man. They're all not sisters to each other, but partial sisters to at least 1 or 2 of the women there, right? 1 and 2, 2 and 3, but also 2 and 1, right? So 2 is a sister to 1 and 3. 3 is a sister to 2 and 4, etc. Okay? Says the Mishnah, Mutar b'rishona b'shlishita b'chamishit. His wedding, his marriages to the 1st wife, the 3rd wife, and the 5th wife are all valid. He's got 3 wives.
None of those 1, 3, and 5 share no parents.
They share no parents, right? So 2 shared with 1 and 3, 4 shared with 3 and 5, but poteret sorotehem, and of course, if he then dies, his turn to die, then and one of his brothers does yibum to say wife number 3, then they all become pater from yibum, right? They pater the tzarot because that was his wife. But he's asur b'shniya u'bervi. He's not allowed to stay married. He's not married to number 2 and number 4 because those are sisters of his wife, and therefore the kiddushin was never chal.
The sisters to number 5.
Yeah, and if a brother, let's say, the man dies, and his brother does yibum to wife number 2, it doesn't matter. She's not married to him, so that doesn't pater the tzara. And imba al hashniya. Now, let's say this first one, in fact, does die. Imba al hashniya la'achar mita rishona. In fact, the first one did die. So then he's married to number 2 and number 4, right? But not 3 and 5. Mutar b'shniya b'reviyit u'poter tzorotehem v'asur b'shlishit u'b'chamishit. Period. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Very, very far-fetched case, but obviously it teaches us this principle. But the very primary principle of this Mishnah is that a wife's sister is prohibited whether she shares only a mother or only a father, right? Otherwise, the whole case falls apart. If you have to have a common father or both, then obviously you can't have all these cases. So it says the Gemara on the top of Daf Nun Hey Amud Aleph, the top line, Alma, you see from this case in the Mishnah, Achot Ishto, that the prohibition of a wife's sister is Beimina Av, Beimina Im, whether they share only a father, only a mother, of course, both. Asurot. The question is Minno. How do you know that, right? We said yesterday that some arayot are only if they share a father, some are also if they share a mother, right? That's what we said by Dodato. It's only if they share a father. How do you know that Achot Ishto falls into that category? It says, well, Yalif mi'achoto. We derive it, we said yesterday that a sister is, which the Torah says pretty clearly, is Beimina Av, Beimina Ein, right? A person's sister is whether it's a sister through his mother or father or both, right? So Achot Ishto, wife's sister, is similar to your sister, right? Neilif mi'achoto. Ma'achoto, just like a person's sister is Beimina Av, Beimina Ein, Avkan, a wife's sister, which is essentially an extension of your sisterhood, right? It's just your wife's sister. Beimina Av, Beimina Ein. It says, well, that's a very good example, but what about aunt? Why do you compare it to your sister? Leilaf mi dodato. Why don't we compare it to dodato, which again meant a father's brother's wife, right? So not through marriage. Ma dodato mina av lo mina ein, which we proved yesterday. Afkan mina av lo mina ein. Well, says the Gemara, well, mistavra, it's logical. Ve'miachoto havli lamelech shekin krovei atzmo. Right? A sister is your relative, and a wife's sister is your relative. It's not through your parents. I mean, it's not indirectly through your parents. Mikrovei atzmo. Says, but a doda, an aunt, is only a krova of a person's father, right? Not his own personal krova. Says, well, adarabba. Why don't we look at it the other way? If you should derive it from dodato, because that's through marriage, right? Shekain davari de kiddushin. The whole reason you're usher to a person's aunt is because she married his father's uncle, his father's brother, his uncle. So why don't you say midavar shali de kiddushin, which is a wife's sister, because you had to marry a wife. No one's born related to their wife. Ella says, well, you're right. We cannot compare it. You can't convincingly say it's more like aunt or more like sister. But what about eshet ach? Compared to a brother's wife, right? Which we said, we're going to see why. We know eshet ach.
Right now?
Sorry?
What are we trying to prove right now?
We're trying to understand whether the prohibition of achot ishto, a wife's sister, is whether she's a wife's sister through the mother and father, or just mother. And so our test cases here are aunt, which we said is only an aunt from my father's brother if the father and the brother share the same father.
Right. We know it is, right? We're just trying to prove from where we know this.
Well, the Mishnah said it is. The question is, how does the Mishnah know? Correct. Right. But so how do we know from the pasuk? So the test case of only through the father, meaning not a relationship that's only through a mother, is aunt, which again, aunt doesn't mean all aunts. It means an aunt that's through marriage. And the test case we said earlier, well, a few test cases of mother and father. One is sister. We said it's not so, you can't compare it. But now we're going to compare it to eshet ach, to a brother's wife, right? Eshet ach is whether the person is a brother through the mother or through the father. And it's prohibited, even though it's a marriage, right? So says the Gemara, let's derive it from eshet ach. Where am I? Eshet ach yalfinan, the shekain davar de kiddushin, it's through kiddushin, but it's also krovei atzmo, because it's a person's brother, it's not a father's relative. And therefore, we should derive from eshet ach that achot ishto is the same thing. So a sister-in-law and a sister, we call them both sister-in-laws. So for us, actually, it is the exact same thing, right? Because one is a brother's wife, which is a sister-in-law, and the other is a wife's sister, which we also call sister. Do we call it sister-in-law? I think we do, right?
Wife's sister? Yeah.
We call it sister, yeah. So we're using this, obviously the Gemara differentiates between the source of that relationship, but that's also called sister-in-law. Says the Gemara, well, that's a great proof, but how do you even know about eshet ach? You made this assumption the whole time that eshet ach, meaning a brother's wife, is prohibited whether the brother shares two parents with you or one parent with you and even only a mother. How do you know that? Eshet ach gufa minale titanya. That we know from the following bright. It said in yesterday's parsha, ervat eshet achicha lo tigale. A person should not reveal the erva of the wife of his brother. Says the Braita, Beimin Av, Beimin Ha'im. That's whether the brother shares a common father or only a common mother. Continues the Braita, again, this is language that we're very used to now. Ata Omer, Beimin Av, Beimin Ha'im. You say that's your assumption. That's your null hypothesis, we would put it in my world. You say Be'mina Av, Be'mina Ein. Maybe Eino Ella Mina Av Lo Mina Ein. Maybe it means only if they share a father. Maybe sharing a mother is not enough. And Dinu, I'll prove it to you. Chayiv kan v'chayiv ba'achoto. Right? It's chayiv, you're chayiv by a brother's wife. You're chayiv by your own sister. Right? Which is not so different because a brother's wife becomes similar to your sister. It's an extension of your brother. Right? So ma'achoto, just like a sister, which we said before, be'mina av, be'mina ein. So avkan, a brother's wife, should be whether the brother is your brother, be'mina av, be'mina ein. That's one perspective. Oh, says the Braita, klach derech zu, or push, think another way. Chayiv kan chayiv b'dodato. You're chayiv by a father's brother's wife, so an uncle. Maybe that's an answer. Maybe that's similar to a brother. Ma dodato min ha'av lo min ha'em. That's only if you share the uncle through a father's father, meaning they share a father. Afkan min ha'av lo min ha'em. So it says the Braita nira lamid domeh. Let us see which one is more comparable. Is Eshet Ach more similar to an uncle or more similar to a sister, right? So one perspective would be that in Krovei Atzmo, that a brother's wife comes through your brother, and a sister comes through you, right? So that's Krovei Atzmo, your own personal relations. Al Tochiach Dodato, don't bring in aunt, Shekrovei Ha'av, because that's a relationship only through a father. O Klach Derech Zu. Right? An aunt is through kiddushin. Sorry, a brother's wife, a sister-in-law, is because the brother married her, and from an aunt, which is davar shalidei kiddushin. Which doesn't require marriage to become your sister. It's isur that comes just from the genetic connection. So therefore, says the Braita. Sorry,
you can have an aunt that's your mother's sister, or you can have.
That's a different prohibition. So again, the Torah separates those into different categories.
Right.
Right, mother, sister is an aunt, is prohibited, but it's not, that would be Be'mina Av, Be'mina Ein. But a father's brother's wife is only Mina Av. Right, correct. Talmud Lomar says the Braita, you can't figure out, you can't say conclusively that Eshet Ach is more similar to your sister than to your aunt. And you can't say it's more similar to your aunt than your sister. So we need a pasuk. Talmud Lomar, therefore the pasuk says, Ervat Achicha Hi. The extra word he tells you that she is, meaning in all situations, bein min ha'av, bein min ha'em. Okay?
Where are we?
So you see when Tosafos says the word lishtok on the left?
Yep.
You see that Tosafos? We're 2 lines below that, the word ve'ema.
Okay.
It's right in the middle of the daf. So
okay, that's the end of the Braita, right?
Correct. That's the end of the Braita. So the Braita says there's an extra word, ervat achicha hi, to tell you that it's your brother's erva, meaning whether he's your brother through your father, which we take for given, or even if he's only your brother through your mother. So it's an extra word in the Torah, basically, to tell you exactly this point. That when we say the brother's wife is prohibited, it's whether it's a person's brother only through a father or even only through a mother. That's
which is the extra word.
The word he is.
The he.
Yeah. Says somewhere, well, that's an important thing, but I have other things that I would love to learn from that word, right? Meaning it's true that that's an extra word, but there's other things to do from it. How do you know this one? What are the other things? Maybe the Torah is telling you only a brother's wife if the brother shares a common father. That's how we define brother. What's the extra word he telling you? That chada, the basic prohibition is if she has children. Remember, because a brother's wife who doesn't have children does not remain usher to you because you can do yibum. But if she, right, meaning he has children, right? If he has children, maybe there is one extra prohibition for an eshet ach who doesn't have children, right? Meaning, let's say he divorces her, right? Which is the case we talked about earlier. So eshet ach she'ein lo bat sheyesh lo. Let me put it this way: if a brother dies without children, right, then the wife becomes permitted to the other brother because that's evil.
Yeah, but if she has children,
sorry.
If she has children, and he dies.
If she has children and he dies, well, it depends on whether those children are his or not, right?
Well, yeah, they're his.
We're talking about his children, not her children.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep reading. We'll see. So we're saying one would be for Eshet Ach who has the Yesh La Banim B'Chaye Ba'ala, and another would be that you're prohibited Be'ein La Banim B'Chaye Ba'ala. Remember, we talked about this yesterday, that you would have thought that the permission to marry a brother's wife, who, remember, if the brother dies without children, you can marry his wife. But we said yesterday, what if he's still alive, but he doesn't have any children? You might have thought that he's still allowed to marry his brother's wife, as we said yesterday. Doesn't matter. Well, that we said yesterday. We had a pasuk of Rav Huna, which was the word nida. Remember, this was yesterday. Why it said the word nida by Eshet Ach was to tell you that this extends even during his lifetime, right? So it says more. Well, maybe maybe the Torah, both verses in the Torah, both teachings in the Torah that you're prohibited to marry Eshet Ach are referring to if they share a father. But Chada, the Yesh La Banim B'Chaye Ba'ala, one is referring to where she had children B'Chaye Ba'ala, which of course would be a regular Eshet Ach, right? They had children, the brother died, she's now a father, so there's no Yibum. But Chada, the Yesh La Banim La'achar Mitat Ba'ala. One might be a case where she had children after Mitat Ba'ala, meaning
she was pregnant.
She was pregnant, correct. So how do you know that's prohibited? It says, well, that doesn't need a pasuk. Yesh La Banim La'achar Mitat Ba'ala Lo Tzricha Kra, because Torah very clearly says, if a person's brother dies, uben ein la, right? It says you don't have children. That's where you can marry her, implying hayesh la banim asura, right? That if he does have a son, it's asur. Doesn't matter. Well, it's true, but maybe again, this is exactly what we said yesterday. Dilma, the Torah is only saying uben ein lo banim asura la alma v'shayim yavim. If he doesn't have children, then she is usher to marry the world, meaning she's still sort of connected to the dead brother. So she's not a free woman, but she's allowed to do yibam. But yesh la banim, maybe if she has children who are born after the brother died, then she's permitted to everybody. Shaya la'ama, she can marry anyone she wants, and she can marry the yavim. Shaya yavim. Inami, or maybe it is in fact teaching you that she can't marry anyone, but it's only an asay, like we said yesterday. Ein la banim, Torah says if she has children, if she doesn't have children, you can marry her for yibum, implying if she does have children, you can't. But that's only a mitzvah, alav haba mechlal asay, right? Ein la banim, we're now the first wide line, the end of the first wide line. Ein la banim mitzvah, yesh la banim reshut. It's permissible. Or inami, sorry, I went ahead. Ein la banim in, right? Yesh la banim lo, that if she has no children, he can marry her for yibum. But if she does have children, he can't. That's only a lava b'mechlal say, and it's not saying, and that doesn't have very strong power. So kativ katav krachrina. So I'm sorry, that's a question mark. So there's a question mark here, which is maybe we need the extra verse by Eshet Ach to tell you that not only is a person not allowed to marry his brother's wife if they have children, but that even if the brother died with childless, but his wife was pregnant, she had a child after he died, you also can't marry her. So how can you say there's an extra pasuk to tell you that even if the brother only shares a mother, maybe you need the extra pasuk for this other case to tell you if she was pregnant and gave birth after death, that you're also prohibited. So answers the Gemara now on the third wide line. You're right. We have another pasuk that we use. Katav kra'achrina. There's another verse that we use for this, and this pasuk this is in Kedoshim, in this week's parsha, where it says ervat achiv gila. It says the word gila, which is extra. I could have just said ervat achiv, and therefore it's telling you another prohibition about a person's brother, and that tells you everything. Basically, it tells you that a brother is, even if it's a brother that only shares a mother, and also that it's a brother even if the brother didn't have children at death but had children after death. That's also prohibited. Okay. So now we're at the fourth wide line. The Ema is, well, I've got another way to look at all these psukim. Maybe you should say that Eshet Ach min ha'av, min ha'im, sorry, ke Eshet Ach min ha'av. That the Torah is telling you that an Eshet Ach, a brother that shares a mother, who then marries a woman, is the same as the wife of a brother who shares the same father as a person. And what's that telling you? That ma Eshet Ach min ha'av, lachar meta bala sharia, just like if a person shares a brother from a father, and the brother dies without children, then the brother's supposed to do yibum, right? He's allowed to marry his brother's wife after death. But remember, we said earlier that if they only share a mother, you don't do yibum, right? If a brother is his brother only through a mother, there's no yibum. So maybe that's wrong. Maybe the Torah is telling you that you should do yibum in that case. That
Father yes, mother no.
only mother, right? Correct. Mother, no, right?
Okay.
So maybe, but maybe that's wrong. Maybe the Torah is in fact telling you that you should. That af eshadach min ha'eim lachar mitat ba'alashaya. Amarkra, the person of he tells you the havyato tehe. They stay sort of, they remain, it's an extra pasuk to tell you that it only you stay in that position, meaning that only someone who shares a common father would also be prohibited, sorry, it's telling you the opposite. That even someone who only shares a common mother would be prohibited. So he tells you an extra prohibition of you're not allowed to sleep with her, and so therefore b'haviyatot tehei that that an ach becomes your ach and remains your ach, and his wife remains prohibited to a person even in this circumstance. Now, ask the Gemara while we're on this topic. Achoto de katuf b'kareit lamu, right? You basically just learned out. Remember, we said that this whole pasuk about ervat achot avicha, right, lo tegaleh, is extra, right? Sorry, we learned that the whole pasuk of a person's sister is extra. So, and we dashed many things from it. That's what we said yesterday. You don't really need to say it. It's repeated. We've learned it out from elsewhere. So, what about the fact that it says kareit? The kareit that it says. Where am I? Sorry. Hard to say. Achoto de katuv b'kareit lamu. Why do you have to say an extra verse of kareit by a person's sister to say you're not allowed to sleep with your sister and you get kareit if you do it? And that is the Kid Rabbi Yochanan. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan shim asan kulam behelem echat chayim kol achat v'achat. Says Rabbi Yochanan, similar to what we say by Shabbat, that if a person does many different arayot with one helem, person wakes up one morning and forgets that there's any prohibitions, and he's with a family in a compound and he sleeps with all the women who are prohibited to him. Again, it's shocking. And then the next day he wakes up and he realizes all the rules. Says Rabbi Yochanan, you're chai for each bi'ah. Because just like Shabbat, they have their own separate, meaning each, it's not like there's one prohibition of arayot and you did all of them. It's each one's its own prohibition, okay? And it's furthermore the Rabbi Yitzchak, and Rabbi Yitzchak, Damar kol chayvei kritot bichlal hayu. And in fact, all chayvei kritot were one set, meaning every time the Torah says, don't sleep with this person, it's kareit, don't sleep with this person, it's kareit. Those people are all together in the same category. Why? Lama yatzda kareit achoto. Why does the Torah speak out specifically? Remember, at the end of the parsha it says, don't do all these arayot v'nichrata. But it also says specifically by sister, don't do it and you get kareit. Why does it specify kareit by achoto? And that's telling you the dono b'kareit v'lo b'malkut. That's telling you that in fact she gets kareit, but you don't get makot. Interestingly, right? You don't get makot when a person by mistake, not by on purpose, sleeps with a sister. And Rashi explains, this is not a really Gemara here, that that when there is a prohibition of kareit, you don't give makot in the same setting because there's a more severe punishment, right? So even if they went to him and said, if you do this, you're going to get makot, they don't mention the kareit, he still doesn't get it. And that's the chiddush here, is that you only get kareit, you don't get something less. And that's a machloket, of course, but that's what Rabbi Yitzchak learns from us. Now, the chalek b'nala. So according to Rabbi Yitzchak, the pasuk to tell you that you get a kareit and not makot. How does he know Rabbi Yochanan's rule that you're mechalek, meaning that every prohibition of arayot is its own thing? Nafgalei from a different pasuk where it says again in last week's parsha, it says el isha benidat tumata. You shouldn't sleep with a woman who's a nida. That's telling you, why does it say the word isha? Who else is going to be a nida, right? It's not going to be a man. So why does it say the word isha? Telling you a woman, meaning every woman is unique who a person has goes to prohibition with. The chayiv hakol isha v'isha. That a person is chayiv for every woman he sleeps with, meaning it's not one set, it's each individual avera. Now, while we're on the topic of all the extra psukim, by dodato it says that a person who sleeps with dodato, aririm yiyu, right? Arim usually means that they're arer, means that they're empty, they'll have no children, right?
That's what we think. Just going back real quick. If it was b'mezid, there would be no question, right? That it would be liable for each one. It's just whether if he helam echad, right?
So the thing about mezid is that you have to get hatra'ah, right? So you have to be warned for each one. So the warning makes the differentiation. Right. The point of shogeg is that you didn't realize in between.
Right. Correct. No. Okay.
But yeah, so you'd be high for each one. Now, So ask the Gemara, Dodato de Katuv Barachmana Aririm Yulam. Why does the Torah say by Dodato? Again, it includes them all together. It says all these prohibitions you get correct, but by some of them it speaks out specific details. So by Dodato, remember Dodato is the father's brother's wife, so an aunt.
Yep.
It says there, Aririm Yamutu. A person, sorry, Aririm Yiyu. A person who does this will die childless, right? Which is what we think of as karet. So why does it speak that out specifically there? That's the Kiddur Rabbah. That is in fact telling you, or for the point of Rabbah, the Rabbah Rami. Rabbah asked about a apparent contradiction. It says in Kiddushim Aririm Yiyu. And it says in maybe later Achtiv Aririm Yamutu. Right? One says the person who does this prohibition will be an arer, will be, let's just say it means childless. And the other says he will die childless, implying that he's not necessarily going to be childless until his death, right? HaKetzad. So it says Rabbah, it's telling you two different things. Yesh Labanim, it's telling you that if this person has children, they're going to die too. Kovran, he will bury them, because meaning when he dies, there'll be no children left. Ein Lo Banim, if he has no children, then he will never have children. He will go the rest of his life without having children. The Itzrich, and it needs to tell you both. Itzrich the Michtav Aririm Yiyu, the Itzrich the Michtav Aririm Yamut. Dikatav Rachman Aririm Yiyu. If you only told me that he will be childless, I would have thought, okay, he will never have children again in his life. But if he already has them, he's not going to get punished, quote unquote, retroactively. Havamina ad chata av michatav elech lo. Right? Sorry, the opposite. That up to the sin, he will lose it, but afterwards it won't be an issue. Katuv Rachmana Aririm Yamutu, telling you that even if he already has children, they will die. Again, if it just said Aririm Yamutu, I might think it's only from here on in, but what he had earlier will not be affected. Kamash Malan, that you have both. And so this is one of the interpretations that Rashi always has of karet. That a person who gets chayiv karet, their children will die, and they will not have more children. Of course, Tosfos is many places bothered because it just clearly, obviously, doesn't happen, right? There are plenty of people over on the road to karet who have children. So, how you understand this is, whether it means they won't have a good mazel or whatever is unclear.
So the karet is not a Beit Din thing, right?
No, right. Karet is means Shema. Correct. Okay, mouthful.
I'm here.
Continues the Gemara now at the 2 dots. Sorry, 5 lines from the bottom. The Mishnah said that a person who's prohibited, a person who sleeps with his Yevamah, even if we said echad ha'ma'areh ve'echad gomer tabiyah, right? Whether a person starts the biyah, which we said yesterday means penetration, but of course I told you yesterday that that's not 100% clear, and we're going to discuss it more today, hopefully, if we get there. We are going to hopefully get there today. And someone who finishes the biyah, who completely penetrates her, or maybe finishes the act of intercourse by ejaculating, so they're chayav for both. Now, we said yesterday, we quoted many psukim to tell you that ha'ara is prohibited by a nida, if you recall, right? Because by nida it says mikoro ha'ara. And then we said all arayot are like nida, because just like a nida is chayav karet, everything that's chayav karet is also included. And then we also included mishkav zachor, and we also included behima. But ask the Gemara today, what about further cases? What about chayvei lavin, right? Like an almanah kohen gadol, right? Which is only a lav, it's not karet. So ha'ara de chayvei lavin minala. How do you know ha'ara by chayvei lavin? Says the Gemara, well, midagali rachmana, it says by, remember, shifcha charufa, right? Shifcha charufa, remember, is a shifcha who is freed, right? So a servant who is not freed. A shifcha charufa is a non-Jewish shifcha, who, remember, now that we know, a non-Jewish shifcha means not really, she's not Jewish, because she had to go to the mikveh to become a shifcha, remember, and accept mitzvot. But she's still considered to be a non-Jew. And the owner, the master, dedicated her to one of his slaves, right? He said she's going to sleep with this slave. So she's quasi-married to that slave. If a man then sleeps with her, that's called shifcha charufa. He ruined it. So then he has to pay, right? We talked about this. So the pasuk talks about it. But by midagali rachmana, the Torah says the words shichvat zera. You have to sleep with her and ejaculate, basically. So what shifchat zera means. which of course, that is not the beginning of Bia, that is the end of Bia. So since the Torah said that, Gabi Shifcha Charufa, Michlal, that all other Chayvei Lavin, Bahara, it's telling you that only a Shifcha Charufa is a special addition, that you need to have Shechvat Zera, but every other Chayvei Lavin, you don't need Shechvat Zera, you just need the initiation of intercourse. It says, Adarabba. I can look at that and say the opposite. Midegali Rachmana Ha'ara b'Chayvei Kritut. Since the Torah told you that by Chayvei Kritut, you only need to initiate intercourse. So maybe you should then conclude that by Chayvei Lavin, you need to actually complete it. Michlal de Chayvei Lavin b'Hara, right? Where am I? Michlal de Chayvei Lavin b'Gemar Bia. So maybe Chayvei Lavin, you need to complete Bia. Amar Ravashi, says Ravashi, if that's the case, Im Kain Lishtok Kra Mishivcha Charufa. The Torah then can be silent and not tell you anything about Shivcha Charufa. And I would have assumed that just like by Chayvei Karet, you need to actually only initiate the Bi'ah, by Shivcha Charufa, you need to finish it. Why did the Torah have to say by Shivcha Charufa, you need to finish it? It must be telling you that in fact it's different and that this halacha applies to all Chayvei Lav. Now ask the Gemara, the Shivcha Charufa is a Chayvei Lav of a regular person. How do you know Chayvei Lavin of Kohanim? The bottom line. Harad the Chayvei Lavin de Kunam Nalan. Then Ate Kicha Kicha. We learn from Exer Shabbat. It says the word Kicha by Chayvei Kritut, and it says Kicha by a Kohen, right? It says Gusham Isha Lo Yikachu. So it says the word Kicha. And the Chayvei Asay Nalan. How do you know Chayvei Asay? Remember, there's some prohibitions that are only Chayav Asay. For example, in Adomi, and these kind of, some of these Dar Revi'i relationships. So earlier you can't do it. So there we learn Atya Bia Bia. And top line now, the halacha of our Mishnah, which is Yevamot L'Shuk Minolan. How do you know a Yevamah, right? Remember, Yevamah is not a prohibition. Yevamah is a mitzvah. And our Mishnah said that Yevamah, even if you initiate Bia, even if you don't finish it, you acquire a Yevamah. How do you know that? Says the Gemara, well, it depends. Why in the world can't a Yevamah marry somebody else, right? Remember, if you say the reason Yevamah cannot marry somebody else, it's a lav, then it's because the lav. It's every other lotas. It's an asay. So that's why Yevamah, who's not allowed to marry a man who's not her Yavim, right? If she does sleep with that person, even with Tchilat Biyah, even with Hara, would be prohibited. Ella, third line now, which is now finally, I'm a little late, but finally it's our Mishnah. Yevamah li Yavim minal. How do you know that a Yevamah and her Yavim are prohibited, are not prohibited, are acquire her, the mitzvah is fulfilled, and he's married to her, even if he only starts Biyah. How do you know that? Says the Gemara, very famous drasha, Atya Biyah Biyah. We learn from the word Biyah, it says Yevamo Yavo Aleh, and it says by Karet Biyah. So we learn Biyah Biyah to tell you that that's called Biyah, that's called intercourse, even if you just initiate it. How about Isha Ba'ala Minala? How do you know that if a man marries a woman, right, and he marries her through intercourse? Remember, one way you could do Kiddushin is through Biyah. How do you know that it's enough if he just starts the process? So there, Atya Kicha Kicha, right? It says the word Kicha by a man marrying a woman, Ishkikach Isha, and it said Ubala, and it says Kicha by Chayvei Kritut, and therefore we learn out Kicha Kicha. Now, so 5 lines from the top.
Bia is just the beginning. So Kicha is also, what's the difference?
Also just the beginning. But they're both, we just have an extra word, or not even an extra word, it's scripted.
But they're both meaning the same thing.
They both mean even, right? So meaning it's even if you just do hara, even just the beginning, that's enough.
Right. Yeah. You would think that the labim would not require, shichvat zera, because it's a less of a punishment. So you would think that,
You're saying the opposite. Well, the Gemara did not. Well, first of all, we learned it from Sukkim, right? Remember, the pasuk is by Nida.
I know.
That's where we start.
Logically,
but the logic the Gemara used was that you get a stronger punishment, right? So it's a worse act. You only need to do less of it.
Right.
But you're saying that I hear what you're saying, but anyways,
a lav is not as bad.
Correct.
All right.
Correct. That's 100% correct.
Okay.
So, but anyways, we're learning it from Sukkim. And that's the bottom
Yeah,
line.
I know. I got it. Yeah.
Continues the Gemara at the top, are 5 lines from Rava. Amar Rava, Lamali dekatav Rachmana Shechvat Zera b'Shivcha Charufa, and Shechvat Zera b'Eshet Ish, and Shechvat Zera b'Sota. In all 3 of these cases, the Torah says the word Shechvat Zera, okay? By Shivcha Charufa, by a married person, and by a Sota, okay? Why do we have all 3 of those? What do we learn out? So it says, well, Shivcha Charufa Kedama. So the first is Shivcha Charufa, is what we already said, which is that that in order to be prohibited or to be over the Isser of Shivcha Charufa, you have to actually finish the Bia. You have to actually ejaculate. Now, Tosfos understands it does not mean literally ejaculate. It means you have to finish the Bia. So you have to penetrate completely and complete the act, whatever that means. But it can't just be hara. Again, Rashi elsewhere, I mean, yesterday, but also elsewhere, sometimes implies you actually have to finish the action. But Tosfos does not like that for many reasons. But that's by Shivcha Charufa. Okay. What about Eshet Ish? That's telling you that a person is prohibited from sleeping with a married woman. Only not hara is prohibited, but he's prat the mishamesh mate. If he sleeps with her when he's dead. And what that means is not that he's dead, it means that he doesn't have an erection, right? So his aver, his organ is dead, right? So then even if you can penetrate a woman that way, you're not chayiv, it's not considered intercourse. It says, well, that's a machloket. That makes sense if you are of the opinion that even if someone penetrates a woman but he doesn't have an erection, he's patur. There is a mandam who says you're chayav. Ella here means literally she's dead. That a man who sleeps with a married woman who's dead, physically dead, is patur. It's not considered sleeping with a married woman. Now there's 2 issues here, right? One is that she's dead, so she's not married anymore. And the second is she's dead, so it's not considered intercourse.
But she's actually dead?
Dead.
But his death is only the organ.
Correct. Well, because you can't be behind a person who's dead for something, right? Just to be clear. But she's literally dead. He penetrates her. That's how we know he's patur. Because that's not considered to be, it says Shechvat Zera implying that there's some connection between them. Her body's cold. There's no connection. Okay? So says the Gemara, well, that's not so simple, right?
Necrophilius, something.
Necrophilius, I think.
I don't know, something.
Anyways, the question is, so the Torah is telling you that's not called intercourse. But what about the other issue? She's not married anymore, right? She's not a married woman if she's dead. So why would she be usher anyways? Says the Gemara, no, I wouldn't have known that. Because I would have thought to say, person's wife is still called his wife after she dies, right? Meaning he still can't marry her relatives, right? Person's not allowed to marry his wife's mother, let's say. It doesn't matter whether the wife's alive or not. The wife dies, he still can't marry her mother, right? So you might think that she remains a married woman. And that you don't. You're not chayiv. So that's why it's in Shechvat Zera by what? By Eshet Ish.
But he can marry his sister, the sister, right?
Sister's a difference, but every other prohibition remains.
That's the only one that
the only one that ends with. I mean, that and Eshet Ach, right?
Right.
So just to be clear, Eshet Ish does end, right? He's not married anymore. He can marry. Well, I guess if the husband dies, you can marry the wife, right? But there are elements of relationship that persist after a person dies, for sure. And what about Sota, Lamali? Why does it say Shechvat Zera by Sota? That's the Kedetanya. Says the Braita in Masechet Sota, Shechvat Zera. Why does it say the word Shechvat Zera by Sota? Prat ledavar acher. It's telling you not if he does it in another way. Now, usually, of course, as we said yesterday, davar acher means anal intercourse, right? But it says the Gemara, what does that mean here? My davar acher. Amrav Sheshet prat l'shekina l'shlo kedarka. That's exactly what it means. It means if a man, remember, Sota is where a man says to his wife, I know you've been hanging out with this guy, don't sleep with him. And then the man sleeps with her, she's a Sota, okay? And he's also prohibited. But what if the husband said to her, I know you're not going to have vaginal intercourse because maybe you don't want to become pregnant, I don't know. But don't sleep with him, right? Shelo kedarka. And then she does it. Says Rava, why would that be any different? Mishkavei Isha. It says Mishkavei Isha, all the ways. That's prohibited too, right? There's no, it's not permitted or it's not usher in that case. It's referring to where a husband said to his wife, I know you're not going to sleep with him, but I don't even want you to touch him. I don't want you to have evarim, which means your limbs should touch, not penetration, but don't even fool around. And that's not considered to be sota. Because the Torah says, shichvat zera, means intercourse. It doesn't mean touching. Amalei Abaya, I don't get, of course that's not prohibited. Torah doesn't prohibit you from acting inappropriately. It's such a funny terminology, right? The Torah answers actions. They don't answer sort of just inappropriate things. El Amar Abaya prat l'shekinala b'nishika. He said to him, don't, kissing here does not mean kissing with the lips, the mouth. Kissing means don't touch her with your limb, your organ, with your penis on her surface, on her vagina surface, not penetrating. But nishika meaning like when you kiss, you come to touch. So he said to her, don't even touch her that way, or she said to his wife, don't you touch him. Probably nishika says, well, but that's a machloket. Remember, and this is what I referenced yesterday, and we'll get to finally, is that prohibited or not? So hanicha lamanda amar ha'ara. What does ha'ara mean? The beginning of intercourse means inserting his penis. Zu achnasat atara. El lamanda amar zu nishika. There's a number says that nishika is itself hara. That if a man touches a woman in the right spot, that is considered, even if he hasn't penetrated, that's considered the beginning of biyah, right? And if that's the case, obviously nishika would be considered biyah. So touching her would be considered sleeping with her. So ma'yikin l'meimar, ella la'olam nishika l'shekina l'derech ivarim. It's in fact where a man said to his wife, I don't want you to even fool around with him. Don't touch him. It's true. You need a pasuk to tell you that in fact that's not going to be a sota. Why? Because I would have thought that the Torah is not prohibiting the act of intercourse. It's prohibiting her from violating her husband. The issue here is whether the husband is offended or prohibits this action. And since the husband says, I mind, that it would be, you might think she becomes a sota. So you might have had a havamina that if a husband said to his wife, not only do I obviously don't want you to sleep with this guy, your person you're fooling around with, don't even touch him, and she goes ahead and does it, that makes her a sota, and she has to leave her husband. Kamashman, that's not okay. That's not true. It's only if it's actual intercourse of shichvat zera. Now, Amar Shmuel, back to what we just said. What is the definition of ha'ara? Right? We've discussed for the last 2 days that all isurei arayot, with a couple exceptions, including shifcha charufa, are prohibited not only if you complete the intercourse, but even if you initiate it, even if you do ha'ara. What is ha'ara? Says Shmuel, ha'ara zu nishika. Ha'ara, in fact, means touching with the organs, right? So touching with his body against her, that is called ha'ara. Why? Says Shmuel. Mashal adam. Think of a person, shemeniach etzba'o al piv. A person puts their finger on their lips. It's impossible not to push the flesh, meaning you can't touch without pushing a little bit. And so just the fact that he touched her means that he penetrated a little bit, even though it doesn't appear that way. But there has to be at least a minimal amount of insertion. When Rabba Bar Chana came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Gemar bi'ah b'shivcha charufa, when it says by shivcha charufa, shichvat zera, meaning you have to finish the act, that only means hachnasat atara. It means you have to penetrate with the tip of the penis. But if sheishat, I don't get it. The Braita says shichvat zera means by shivcha charufa enu chayav ela al biat hamiruk. You only chayav for bi'ah hamiruk, which Rashi says means bi'ah that can make a child, right? That can conceive. My love mirukid must be that you have to put the entire penis inside. Lo miruk atara, it's even only the tip. Ki atara dimi amar Rabbi Yochanan ha'ara zu achnasat atara. Unlike Shmuel, who said that ha'ara is nishika, which means just touching, said Rabbi Yochanan, quoted by Rav Dimi, that ha'ara is actually penetration of the atara, of the tip. Amrulei, so they said to Rav Dimi, Rabba Bar Chana lo amar hachi. Rabba Bar Chana just quoted Yochanan as saying that hara means just nishika. So how could you say that Rabbi Yochanan says this? We just heard Rabba Bar Chana say Rabbi Yochanan said something different, said Rav Dimi to them, I'm Malay. Well, I'm telling you what I heard. You shakrai or not shakrai. Either he's lying or I'm lying. So I'm not backing down. I don't know what Rabbi Bar Chana said, but I'm telling you what I heard from Rabbi Yochanan. He ata Ravin Rabbi Yochanan. When Ravin came, he said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Ha'ara zu achnasat atara. That ha'ara means actually insertion, like Ravin said. Sorry, like Rav Dimi said. So Adarabba Bar Bar Chana Vade Pali. This clearly argues the Rabba Bar Bar Chana, who said that ha'ara meant only touching. But Adishmol Lema Lema Pali. Do you have to say for sure that this argues with Shmuel? It says not necessarily low. Maybe what Shmuel was saying was that once you touch until you firmly penetrate, that's called hara'ah. Ki'ata Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda Amar Rabbi Yochanan hara zu hachnasat atara. So again, another opinion in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, sounds like a consensus now, is that hara means actual penetration, and gemar bi'ah means gemar bi'ah mamash. Gemar bi'ah means completing the act itself. Again, not necessarily ejaculating, but completing the act itself. And mikan ve'elech, but if you do less than this, right, then eino ela nishika upatur ala upaliga dishmo. If you do less than actual penetration, that's called nishika, and it's not chayav. And so that's how Rabbi Yochanan seems to say, which argues with Shmuel, and says that actual beginning of biyam means the beginning of actual penetration. Completing means penetrating completely. But if a person just touches, a man just touches a woman, that in that spot with his organ, with his penis, then that is not considered bia, and you would be patur for that act. And that's how Rabbi Yochanan paskins. I think that's how we paskin, but
right. So or you would not be kona. You would not. It would not be.
All the things, correct. You're not chayav for yibam. You're not kona for yibam. You're not chayav for shtish, etc. Okay, tough Gemaras. We'll stop here. Thank you for joining. And I don't know who's going to pick it up tomorrow. Pick it up at 2 dots.
You would think that would have to be Gemar Biyah for Yibum if the purpose is,
Again, I agree, but it's all based on these psukim, right? We've dashed from all these psukim that it says the word biyah, and that's Yevamot Yavola. That's the definition overall of biyah.
Right.
Okay. Have a great day, Chanan. Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov. Yeah, thank you. Okay.